Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the absolute ultimate blueprint for governing shared digital resources. We're talking about a massive mindset shift here, moving totally away from rigid, top-down control and leaning into dynamic, real-world collaboration. So let's just jump right in. Picture a massive project in architecture, engineering, or construction. You've got a common data environment absolutely stuffed with thousands of drawings, 3D models, and specs. You've got dozens of different organizations all working in the exact same space. And look, we all know that sheer, heart-dropping panic when someone uploads a late, conflicting file, right? It throws everything off. The thing is, everyone depends on this information, but literally no single organization can guarantee its integrity all by themselves. So it begs the question, how on earth do we steward something that we all rely on but nobody actually owns? Trust me, this isn't a technical glitch. It's a governance challenge. To understand this, we have to look back at the tragedy of the commons. It's this famous concept from 1968 by an ecologist named Garrett Hardin. Just picture a shared green pasture. Every herder wants to add more animals because, hey, it benefits them individually. But eventually, that pasture gets completely overgrazed and destroyed. And honestly, this perfectly mirrors the digital collaboration chaos we see today. Think about data hoarding or just consuming project info without ever contributing back. When we act solely in our immediate self-interest, our shared digital ecosystems degrade exactly like that overgrazed pasture. Now, for decades, Hardin's theory completely dominated our thinking. It created this massive, incredibly stubborn false dichotomy. The underlying assumption was that shared resources are basically doomed to fail, and the only way to save them was by choosing one of two extreme options: either strictly privatize the resource or bring in heavy, top-down government control. We literally thought it was a simple binary choice: markets versus states. But, spoiler alert, that assumption was completely dead wrong. Enter Elinor Ostrom, the 2009 Nobel laureate in economics. She completely flipped that outdated assumption right on its head. Instead of just accepting failure, Ostrom spent decades out in the field studying real communities. We're talking fisheries up in Maine to complex irrigation systems in Nepal. Rather than asking why commons fail, she asked why some commons actually succeed. And her research proved something amazing. Participation actually creates ownership. And ownership naturally encourages stewardship. It turns out, people don't inherently destroy the things they share. So, Ostrom discovered what we call a third way. Communities all over the globe successfully self-govern through cooperation, trust, and shared accountability. There are no distant authorities or rigid corporate overlords required for this to work. She called this polycentric governance. Instead of one giant, heavy pyramid trying to control every single thing from the top down, governance actually emerges organically through multiple, interconnected hubs of responsibility. People create their own local rules, they monitor each other, and they sustain these resources for generations. Through her research, Ostrom identified 8 core design principles for a successful commons, and what's wild is how beautifully they map right onto our modern digital projects. For instance, having clearly defined boundaries in a physical forest translates directly to having defined roles and information ownership in a digital workflow. Or accessible conflict resolution. In our world, that means consciously choosing dialogue over defensiveness when interpretations clash. These aren't just rigid, bureaucratic templates. They're essentially behavioral patterns that unlock incredibly complex network cooperation. But, okay, here is the real kicker. Those 8 principles, they mean absolutely nothing without what we call relational intelligence. This is the actual human capacity to inhabit these structures and care for the system. Think about it. You can have the best rules, the absolute sharpest boundaries, and literally the most expensive software money can buy. But if the people involved don't actually trust each other, or if they can't navigate a simple disagreement without completely torching the relationship, the whole system falls apart. Because at the end of the day, governance is entirely about the human element. Let's look at what actually happens when that crucial human element goes missing. You end up with this, the gray diamond. It perfectly represents a stagnant, highly bureaucratic hierarchy. Just look at the vibe here. Apathy, avoidance, anxiety, and constant accusation. This is a toxic environment where strict control and compliance completely choke out any real collaboration. Governance just devolves into this endless obsession with protecting your own turf. Participation plummets, adaptation totally dies, and suddenly, boom, you are right back in the tragedy of the commons. But let's contrast that with a significantly better model, the red diamond. Instantly, you can feel the energy shift here. Now we're talking about adaptability, anticipation, awareness, and abundance. This shape represents flow, continuous learning, and true community-driven stewardship. It's not anarchy. Authority still exists here, but it's actually balanced by real responsibility. The structure is balanced by meaningful participation. It is the literal embodiment of Ostrom's polycentric governance in action. When we put them side by side, the contrast is stark. On the left, the gray diamond traps us in rigid pyramids of power. And look, trying to govern highly complex digital environments with a heavy hierarchy, it just creates endless bottlenecks and soul-crushing bureaucracy. But on the right, the red diamond pulls us toward dynamic, interconnected networks. Ostrom's ultimate lesson for us is that effective governance requires combining autonomy with accountability. We literally have to stop trying to micromanage behavior and start creating the conditions where stewardship just naturally flourishes. So, where does this leave us today? Well, we have to pivot to the ultimate modern frontier, the age of artificial intelligence. The sheer speed and massive scale of global networks are completely breaking our old centralized governance models. We are quite literally drowning in information. A lack of data is no longer the problem. What we desperately need now is coordination. The defining question of our time isn't how do we access information anymore, it's how on earth do we govern shared intelligence? The thing is, AI doesn't eliminate the commons, it actually creates vast, totally new shared digital ecosystems. I'm talking about shared AI-generated knowledge pools, open-source software development, global communities of practice, and DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. These ecosystems are incredibly valuable precisely because they are shared. But make no mistake, they face the exact same risks as those physical fisheries Ostrom studied. They require active protection, intentional care, and most importantly, a community willing to step up and govern them responsibly. And this is exactly why this matters to you directly. AI can absolutely generate information, but humans must govern the relationships. An AI system might be smart enough to flag a massive coordination risk on your project, but real people have to sit down and decide how to actually respond to it. AI might spit out a genuinely brilliant design option, but humans are the ones who have to evaluate its real-world implications and navigate the inevitable disagreements that follow. The actual stewardship of trust, accountability, and the final decision-making, that remains strictly 100% human. So, how do we actually put all this theory into practice? We use what we call the Commons Health Check. It's a highly practical 5-step habit for your teams or networks. First, you have to name the shared resource, because if it theoretically belongs to everyone, it usually means it belongs to no one. Second, clarify the boundaries. Who is actually doing what? Third, ensure active participation. Are the right voices genuinely being heard in the room? Fourth, monitor the system feedback to catch small problems way before they become full-blown crises. And fifth, test just one practical improvement. Small, consistent, real-world tweaks will absolutely always outperform some massive reform that never makes it off the whiteboard. This all brings us to the ultimate paradigm shift. The industrial age rewarded people for owning physical assets. The information age rewarded people for owning, and let's be totally honest, usually hoarding, knowledge. But today, we are actively moving into the stewardship economy. As AI makes knowledge infinitely abundant and cheap, your competitive advantage is no longer just holding on to data. It's your relational capacity to actually coordinate collective intelligence. The real winners going forward will be the ones who can build the highest levels of trust, active participation, and quick adaptation. We have covered some seriously incredible ground today, from the tragedy of the commons all the way to the absolute power of polycentric governance and relational intelligence. Elinor Ostrom proved once and for all that ordinary people are entirely capable of successfully governing shared resources when they are simply given the chance to participate. So I want to leave you with a question to really chew on for your own collaborative networks. What exactly are we stewarding? And more importantly, what kind of stewards are we becoming? Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and keep building those connections.